This is Michael Popok for the new Legal AF channel. Time for a viewer guide for the Tuesday debate between Tim Walz and JD Vance. It's a proxy fight between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, since Donald Trump has chickened out and decided for the first time in modern history there will be no third presidential debate. There will be no closing argument by the Republican candidate before people vote in less than 40 days. He's going to cede the stage to his amateurish vice presidential candidate, JD Vance, to make the closing argument to the American people in front of 50 or 60 million people. It's hard for me to believe that Donald Trump is going to allow JD Vance to get the last word while all major eyeballs in America are looking at the campaign. And I still have a working theory, and I posit that if JD Vance craps the bed, that's a legal political term, against Tim Walz, which is likely, that you'll see Donald Trump trying to get Kamala Harris to do a last debate, in the last few hours or days leading into the election. But let's leave that for another hot take. Let me give you a viewer guide for what to expect and how to judge this prize fight that's going to break out on Tuesday between JD Vance and Walz. Let's start with what Tim Walz has to do. Tim Walz, according to focus groups that liked what they saw with the approach that Kamala Harris used against Donald Trump, Tim Walz has to do two things simultaneously. And he can. He's very good at walking and chewing gum at the same time. First, he's got to do is fight JD Vance to effectively a draw on the negative criticism of JD Vance. Now, Tim Walz is going to have to hold himself back because there are at least, and I'll go through them, at least almost a dozen weaknesses and topics and controversies that JD Vance is responsible for in the short time that he's been on the campaign trail. You are already thinking about them in memes and attacks, primarily focused on women and women in power. Let's put that aside. So it's going to be a target-rich environment, is what I'm saying for Tim Walz. He's going to have to pick and choose. He can't go after all of them. He's going to have to go after the best of and fight it to a draw. Because what the American people don't want to see is they don't want to see, this is already going to be a heated pitch battle on Tuesday. I mean, grab the popcorn, get ready. This is not going to be, this isn't going to be a boring affair. This is going to be hand-to-hand combat, mano a mano, between two people who are trying desperately to get their candidate elected and try to destroy the other. But the American people, the ones that are really voting here, and the independents, the 5% that haven't made up their mind yet, they don't want to see that. So Tim Walz has to do that part of his task. Just fight it to a draw, right? You'll hear from JD Vance attacking Tim Walz primarily on this BS stolen valor issue about Tim Walz's honor and his valor in serving in the military. I'll talk about that in a minute. But what Tim Walz has to do is have to be, besides being Captain Weird, making JD Vance out to be as weird as he is and have the mask fall and everybody see the exposed JD Vance for who he is. But he's got to make a positive message. He has to be the joyful, happy warrior that we saw when he was announced and he did that first rally with Kamala Harris. He has to bring a positive message to the American people and to the undecided voter. He has to tell them not why the other person's weird. We sort of get that already. But what is the positive values and policy that Kamala Harris will continue in her role as president of the United States, supported by Tim Walz? What is the positive message? What is the planks of their campaign? And that's what Tim Walz has to do as the ambassador for the Kamala Harris campaign. I mean, there's a great line, and it was also used by Barack Obama when he ran. You campaign in prose, right? I'm sorry, let me try it again. We'll leave it in though. You campaign in poetry, but you have to govern in prose, meaning you can have high-spirited and very evocative language almost spiritual campaign language in order to try to get the vote and to connect with the American people. An aspirational tone. The Shining City on the Hill by Ronald Reagan. You are the change that you've been looking for. Barack Obama. Yes, we can. That type of thing. That cadence, that poetry. But then when you have to govern and you get elected and hopefully you get swept in with the Democratic Congress and House, you have to govern in prose, right? That's the hard, dry language of governing. But right now we're in the poetry moment. And Tim Walz, he was a social studies teacher. Hopefully he also sat in on some English classes and he can also do it. And I think he's good at it. I think the American people naturally like him because he's naturally likable and not weird. He's the social studies and commander-in-chief, right? Social studies of campaigner. He's the one everybody likes, and he pulls that off. He's America's football coach, right? And he's got that little huggable, lovable quality to him that, of course, JD Vance, with his phony hillbilly affectation and neatly trimmed new beard and his embrace of MAGA as the heir apparent is weird. And he got weirder as the campaign went on. We'll go over that next. So Tim Walz has to bring forward what is Kamala Harris's policies to move the economy forward, to deal with the rise in certain pricing in the supermarket and in the pocketbook, right? The gouging that's still going on post-COVID, how she deals with the foreign trade deficit and the Chinese trade barriers and the environment and the pain at the pump to lower those gas prices, and what she's going to do, of course, to restore women in this country to first-class citizenship and give them the right over their body and bodily autonomy and reproductive rights. That's the happy warrior that has to come out with Tim Walz. So it has to be, in my view, 70%, 75% positive messaging and 30% that guy over there is weird. And at the rate they're going, he's one heartbeat away from the presidency, and doesn't that scare the crap out of you? That's the other 30% that he has to put together. If you're looking for the recipe proportions, I think that's what he has to do. And he already has going in the wind at his sails. As I said, America's social studies teacher, America's coach, likable, served with valor in the military. Sure, it wasn't wartime, but the guy went into the military at, 18? And the only reason he left was not to take a high-paying job on Silicon Valley or go to Yale Law School like JD Vance, was to run for Congress from a small district in his adopted home state. He's been in public service since he left the ROTC program. That has to be credited. Donald Trump doesn't have the moral authority to attack somebody for serving in the military. There's not one person in the direct lineal descent of Donald Trump that's ever served in the military. Not his father, not his grandfather. First of all, his father was the one that came to this country from, Germany or Bavaria or something like that, when they were the Drumpf family. You can look it up. And they became Trump when they came here. I think he's got a brother or a cousin that served in the military, but none of the children served in the military. Donald Trump didn't serve in the military. His grandfather didn't serve in the military. My great-grandfather came to this country in the late 1800s. My grandfather came to this country as an 8-year-old in 1908. My father served in the Army and then in the National Guard. And I didn't. And that was a choice that I made, even though I signed up for selective service at the appropriate time when I turned 18, when that was required. And I hope that I've been able to serve my country in another way. But Tim Walz, his record is unassailable. This swift boating that's been done by Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, the campaign managers for Donald Trump, taking a page out of Chris LaCivita's playbook of swift boating John Kerry, I think it's pretty transparent. People see it for what it is, and they're going to credit him. And now Donald Trump, as these two go into the debate room on Tuesday, he's already starting to cut the legs out from under JD Vance by saying inappropriate, despicable, disgusting comments about Kamala Harris that maligns all Americans who have some sort of mental disability or either born or through accident, by calling her being mentally incapable since she was born, right? Attacking all of them, which is consistent with what all the MAGA followers did before they found out that Tim Walz' own son had some sort of developmental learning issue, or perhaps was on the spectrum. And that's why he was joyous but in tears and yelling for his father at the Democratic National Convention. But before they knew that, they decided that they were going to attack the boy, attack the young man, because he was crying about his father being elevated to the potential vice presidency. This is what you're voting for when you're voting for Republicans and MAGA, people who make fun of people who are the other. Donald Trump, historically, he went so far, and I'll do a separate hot take on this, and this doesn't help JD Vance. It's going to come up during the debate. Donald Trump went so far that even his own party bashed him in the last 2 days. Like even Lindsey Graham said, "All right, let's not talk about and bring up and attack by extension, by proxy, the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people in America who have some sort of handicap or handy-capable issue, or are on the spectrum, or have mental issues." Are we back in fifth grade? Is that what we're doing now? When I was a kid, because we didn't know any better, and it certainly was politically incorrect then, and now use the R word against one of your friends? Is that where? I thought he was an 80-year-old man. But this is what JD Vance is going to have to justify when he's on that debate stage. Now let's talk about the target-rich environment for Walz against JD Vance for a moment. And I'm just going to reel them off, and then I'll talk about a few of them here. You've got with 60 million people watching, this is the issues that Walz is prepared to go after JD Vance as necessary, and JD Vance better be ready to explain it to the American people. Childless cat ladies who have no right in American society to contribute to political life or to help make policy decisions for other Americans. That is JD Vance. Continuing the theme, women shouldn't have the right to vote. Women should see as their highest calling having children, and if they don't have children, they are lesser. They are lesser patriots or Americans. Women, by extension, the implicit part of his argument is women really shouldn't work outside the home. And then, of course, he's always got his wife next to him, who apparently has not worked out of the home recently. Then you've got the couch, screwing the couch memes. You could look it up, in which it wasn't true that in Hillbilly Elegy, his book, he said that to pleasure himself sexually, he used to pleasure himself on his couch. But it had a ring of truthiness that kind of took off as a meme, which chapped his backside, and then he decided to get back at everybody. And instead of hitting the targets that he wanted, he purposely went after the underprivileged, disenfranchised Haitian community in order to make his point about memes. We'll get to that in a minute. You then have the whole brouhaha in his own party because of the fact that he chose to marry the person that he loved, and that woman happened to be Hindu American and brown. And his children are vegetarians. And that led to a whole backlash within MAGA, within alt-right, within the white supremacist subgroup of MAGA about, whoa, how is this guy ever going to be strong on the borders, Nick Fuentes said. Look at his wife. All right, so you got that going. And then you had that weird split screen of people chanting racist things in the audience of the Republican National Committee as Usha Vance was giving a speech, or right before she gave a speech. Not a great look. Then you've got the Iranians, whose one thing they decided to leak to try to hurt the Trump campaign was the dossier or white paper about JD Vance and about how he was selected and the things in there. Then you got the fake narrative, the fabulist in JD Vance, that he claims to be that which he is not, which is a hillbilly. He's a hillbilly that went to Yale Law School, was I think a Rhodes Scholar, and was a Silicon Valley venture capitalist. Just the way I like my hillbillies. He's the first hillbilly I ever heard of that claimed to be that. Now look, if that was his real authentic truth, then I would be fine with it. But he's going to be hard-pressed to stand up against, our Midwestern football coach in Tim Walz and come out the other side looking great. Besides the fact Tim Walz is going to tower over him on the stage, and that's always not a good look. I know that Donald Trump spent a lot of time at his debate arguing that Kamala Harris, who's 5'4" but wears heels, shouldn't be allowed to stand on a box because the world should see that he's taller and I guess that he's a man. Well, what are they going to do here? JD Vance is short. He's so short that Pete Buttigieg is portraying him in the debate prep with Tim Walz. I don't care about that. I'm not making light of people. I'm 5'10", so it's not like I'm some sort of giant. But what's he going to do? JD Vance is shorter by a good head than Tim Walz. Let's see what happens. Is he going to be in a high chair or some sort of booster chair at the debate? JD Vance, let's see. I don't hear a lot about the logistics there. Then you've got the Project 2025 issue, which will not go away, which was created by the Heritage Foundation and its dog killing with a shovel executive director. You can look it up, and I have a hot take up on it. And you have the foreword for his book about how to combine God and church and put women back in their place, which apparently is in the kitchen again without jobs, how to put all of that into American and U.S. policy. And by getting rid of the Department of Education and also getting rid of and regulating women and their sexuality and men and their sexuality, all in Project 2025. So bad that even Donald Trump said, well, I saw parts of it. It looks a little wacky to me, but it's his blueprint. It's going to be shoved down Donald Trump's throat by MAGA and by him being hijacked by the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, and the right-wing Christian groups that see him as their conduit. They hate the messenger, but they love the message, and they're going to hijack the messenger. That's what's going to happen. And JD Vance, even though the entire Heritage Foundation and most of the last administration of Donald Trump helped create Project 2025 and all of its principles, which is basically the platform and the planks of Donald Trump's run for office, it's going to be the blueprint for the first 180 days. You know, that day one when Donald Trump is a dictator? And there's also that, by the way, going on the stage during a debate between vice presidents. It is a proxy war between the vice presidents about the presidents and the candidates. So there's going to be a lot of, your candidate, Vice President Harris, and your candidate, the felon Donald Trump. So there's going to be that too, right? That also is sort of a third tension or third friction that's going to be going on the debate stage. So by the time, that's why I said it's like a target-rich environment for Tim Walz. What does he go after? And then you've got the Haitian community up in arms because Vance is doubling down through memes and attacks, along with Donald Trump, on the attacking Black and brown, disenfranchised, disadvantaged community in America. And all I have to say, and I've spoken to my friends in those communities, including the Haitian community, and all people are hearing when he attacks Black and brown people is, that could be our group. That is our group. That's not a good look. If they think as strange, weird white guys that other Black and brown groups just go, well, he's not attacking us. They don't think that. They think it'll be us next, and we better speak up and we better vote against these wackos and not let them anywhere near the White House. And that's what the boomerang effect, the backfire effect of going after the Haitian community and antagonizing and alienating the Haitian community in Miami and the Black and brown communities in the battleground states. But JD Vance has decided to double down on it and say that it's an example of the failed border policy of Kamala Harris. Does he understand? I know he went to Yale, but does he understand how borders work? And has he seen a map? I defy you to show me where the border between Haiti and Ohio is, or Haiti in any part of the continental United States. It's an island that floats in the Caribbean. Okay? It's not an example of failed border policy. The Haitians didn't sneak in here. In fact, I lived in Florida for 20 years. And while there was a very successful wet foot, dry foot policy that would allow any Cuban who got his way in any way, shape, and form, if he touched American soil, dry foot, he was staying or she was staying. And if they didn't, wet foot, they weren't. That's what it was called locally in Miami. The Haitians, by contrast, were always turned away. And even if they made it to dry land, which was almost impossible, they were turned away by both parties, by the way, whoever was in office. So the Haitians have always gotten the short end of the stick in immigration policy. And that's what's really made a proud Haitian American community, business and legal community in Miami that I call my friend, parts of it, really upset. And now they decide to use it in the waning days of a campaign, the Republican side, as gasoline to try to light up their voters. I got news for JD Vance. Having attacked women, having tried to take away their reproductive rights, having to try to defend the elimination of a woman's right to choose, having to defend your attacks on Black and brown people and your role in Project 2025, and the things that you said in 2008 when you were trying to sell your books, and you said that Donald Trump was America's Hitler, that he was a drug, a narcotic a needle in the arm of America, that he was bad for America. Remember that JD Vance, the one without the beard? This is like the old Star Trek, the original. I'm OG, where they went through the transporter and they ended up on the alternative Enterprise, where the bearded Spock was the bad guy, carried a knife and was ready to kill anybody. The bearded JD Vance is like the evil Spock on that episode. And if you go back to the beardless JD Vance, he was telling the truth when he was trying to sell his books. He's only lying now because he thinks he's a heartbeat away from the presidency if he pulls this thing off. I mean, he's got to be pinching himself at night. He's like, he wrote one book. I mean, I don't know about read, but he wrote one book. He was a senator barely got out of the primary and was a senator for less than 8 months and did absolutely nothing. When he says to Tim Walz, what did your boss do when she was there as vice president for 4 years? First of all, vice presidents don't set policy. They don't pass bills or laws. They support the administration, and they do what they're told to do by the president ultimately. What did he do in 8 months as a senator? Absolutely zero, nothing. He set up a fake, phony charity in Ohio. He was a Silicon Valley, not that successful venture capitalist for a short amount of time, got friends with Peter Thiel, and that's about it. That's his resume. Pretty thin gruel, if you ask me. And he's got to be pinching himself. He's like, I am this close to being the president of the United States. I mean, he is, even though I think he's going to lose badly. I mean, we're down to, there's only 2 people running in the entire world of several billion people. There's only 2 that can be vice president. We're going to see both of them on the 2nd on October. And I'm going to follow it right here. I'll come back to you. And as I hear other things, and as Donald Trump continues to dig another hole in front of JD Vance before he even gets on the stage, right here on this new Legal AF YouTube channel, free subscribe, help us get to 200,000 before Halloween. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, until my next exclusive content, right here on the Legal AF MTN channel in collaboration with the Midas Touch Network. This is Michael Popok. I'm reporting. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.